Hey guys, I screwed up a recording yesterday, so I have to redo it anyway. And I thought maybe I make one of these coaching videos accessible to everyone rather than just putting it behind the paywall for the member section. Just to give you an idea what kind of content you can expect there. So yeah, if you don't know about it yet, there's a member section where I just upload all my coaching sessions as long as the coachee agrees to being recorded, of course. And my hope is that everybody who maybe can't afford the coaching session themselves can just go to the YouTube members section, join the channel, and learn from others and their mistakes, basically. And I don't want to talk around it too much. A lot of people, a lot of guys of you are driving the Porsche a lot, and I usually shy away from that car because I'm not a particular fan, to say the least, because of the way it drives. It's teaches you bad habits that you really can't take on board for other cars. So yeah, I know, but still, it's just fast in the game, so I totally understand it being driven. And of course, there's people who want to get better in it too. And I was approached for a coaching session with a Porsche on Spa. So this is what we'll have in front of us right now. Let's take a quick look at how the telemetry data looks here. We have his session up here on the left, and we have my session up here below. You can see there's roughly a 2-second gap between us. And the first thing I always do is get a first idea of where this time is lost. And I mean, you could, in theory, look at these charts here with how the speed develops. Of course, where I'm going faster, I'm gaining time. But sometimes it's just not pronounced enough, really. So the easiest way to do is get the delta up, and then you'll immediately see where more time is lost, where less time is lost, and where are the points on the track that you really need to focus on. So here, for example, you can see corner 1 doesn't seem to be much of an issue up until Eau Rouge, and then afterwards, all of a sudden, the time starts fading away. So there's the first kind of point of focus, and then through Les Combes, a couple more temps add up. Then this 180-degree corner, and there seems to be a bigger issue here with the higher downforce corners in the middle sector, and a pretty pronounced pattern through all these corners there. Then I don't know, just a couple more last here onto the back straight, and then let's say different approach through the last chicane. So let's take a look at this lap. I've trimmed down the volume a bit for this one because it's not really the most important, and you can hear my voice. And usually how this works in the coaching session is that we go through the lap just at full speed once for me to get a rough idea of how the line looks that is chosen. And you can see the driver here already seems to have quite some ideas of sim racing on board and does know how the basics work. So he's using all the track available, or at least most of it. And then there is something to correct probably here at the entry of Eau Rouge. We'll go through that in a second when we go corner by corner. But still, in the end, even though he has the fundamentals right, in the end there is at least a 2-second gap or so that he seeks to close. So it's really going to be more in the detail here, right? The line choice seems more or less alright. He's taking the wide entries, coming across to the inside, using everything on the exit up until the track limits, but still there's more time to find, right? And going through the lap, I can already see, okay, he's in some corners just not exploiting as much as the car is capable of, and there's certainly some adjustment in the pedal work needed to extract that lap time. Coming up here to the fast left-hander, that's probably quite a different approach. And you can certainly carry a lot more speed through there, and every kilometer you can keep alive in the corner is going to matter on the straight as well. This one also very tricky corner, but he's even doing the right trade-off here by kind of placing the car in the middle of the track to at least get an entry into the left-hander as well. And also here just putting a very, or rather late apex in the corners. Definitely the right approach, but still some lap time is lost along the way every now and then. Coming out the back straight, let's skip that a bit. There isn't really too much that you can improve anyway. Everything is flat out. Make sure to use everything on the outside here to get a good entry here. Keep the speed alive, more importantly. And then line up the car for the last corner where you could take different lines, definitely. And yeah, this time around, he's probably just overshooting that a little. So let's not take that as a reference of his, let's say, typical lap. So in the end, we're looking at it's going to be to 19.1 across the line. And let's start over. As I said, we don't have to look at corner one because that seemed perfectly fine. He's taking the very, very wide entry. And just rolling through there, it does seem all right. The trail braking was visible. Also on the exit, there is much oversteer, so he's gentle on the throttle as much as he needs to be. So if we just look at the data there, zoom in a bit, bring it more to the middle of the screen, then you can see there isn't too much difference in how we approach this corner. The only difference you might be able to see is that he just goes to 100% under braking a lot faster. And this for me is just an indication of that his pedal is probably set up a lot softer than mine, if he's even using a load cell, which in this case he was. But it seems to be set up a lot softer than mine, just because I'm also applying the brake as hard and as fast as I can. But still, it takes me quite a bit longer to reach 100% just because of the 50 something kilos that I set up my brake pedal to. So I'm just assuming his pedal might be somewhere around the 20 kilo mark or something. So he has a smaller range that he wants to use, but as long as his trail braking kind of works out, and at least it seems to be the case here, there is no need to adjust that if he can be gentle enough with the lower amount of force needed. And then also on corner exit, I'd say this looks pretty similar. There isn't much to adjust, and the biggest thing really is there isn't much time traded between us, right? He's losing a bit on the entry and braking, gains some back middle of the corner, loses some on the exit. This pretty much down on a lap by lap basis, so there's not really an area of focus for him in the first corner. But coming up to Eau Rouge, I definitely noticed something, and if we roll it forward a bit, he's really taking a very wide swing, and then on several cars in the game you'd probably want that, but on the Porsche, which is so sensitive on the front axle and very responsive, yeah, kind of throwing the car into there can more unsettle it than actually help you go into the corner. Usually the downforce and the pointiness of the front in the Porsche is enough to get it into this corner in a much more subtle way. And I usually won't use that much track on the left here in the Porsche and throw it into Eau Rouge there, or just make don't use as much track and probably turn in a little earlier as well. We'll see in the data in a second. And then he has a really late turn in here. You can see the front gripping up, then the rear becoming loose a bit, then the front starting to skid a bit and lose some of the grip, and then he's for a short amount of time is almost in a four-wheel drift. And just by that, he's losing a couple kilometers up the hill. That in the end, just looking at that curb here, you'll see me having 238 kilometers over the curb as a rough target with that setup that we've been using. And these 3 kilometers is essentially what he's going to miss along the whole of the straight. So it's, even though he's flat out through Eau Rouge, and he doesn't seem to have much of a problem going through there, he's still losing quite some time. And if we take a closer look at the data, what's happening there, we have to be really, really, really precise. So it does make sense to change what we're seeing here a bit. Let's go down to minus 80 to 80 degrees in the steering column, and then we can see there is a bit of difference in the data as well. So his is the red bar, the red line, and mine is the white reference line. And you can see coming over to the left, okay, just the timing difference. Okay, that's not the case, but even though it looks small here, you can see from, say, turning to the left, the highest amount turning to the left to highest amount turning to the right, which would be for me kind of this area, so quite a bit. So I'm taking my time, so to say, to turn from the left to the right. And he's just, let's say, from his peak to the left to his peak on the right is a much shorter time. So he's forcing the car around a little harsher. And you can also see that I'm starting to go towards the right a lot earlier across the middle. So where the car is actually starting to turn right a little earlier than he does. And this is the difference in approach that you could see here through Eau Rouge. I'm just being more gentle with the car. I'm not throwing it in as much because the Porsche doesn't need that. It has the downforce and it will grip up anyway. Plus, if you turn so harshly, you're usually going to set up to unsettle the car more, and this will cost you these 1-2 kilometers that then in the end will be what matters going along the straight here, and you can see the time starts fading away from by entering Eau Rouge at 600s down, end of the straight, all of a sudden it's almost 210s, and there's not much that you can do, right, when you're full throttle anyway. So it's all about being gentle here on turn in into Eau Rouge to keep the speed alive and to carry more speed onto the straight. And this alone worth, it's basically a free tenths or 1.5 tenths there. But yeah, in the end, we're looking for almost 2 seconds. So this, even those 2 tenths aren't going to be the majority of the time. So we'll have to take a deeper look on here, the section in Les Combes. This is going to matter a lot. So let's skip the video forward a bit to just look into this corner. And let's say braking point wise, looking at data, I'm even braking a tiny bit earlier than he does. Again, you can see his brake is applied quicker to 100%. So this just might be a tiny bit of a trade-off there. Should be fine. But in the end, he's like braking 78 meters later or something. But he's going onto the curb there, which just gives you that tiny amount of extra drag. But what we can see is it slowed down even more. That he has a fair bit of turning with the brakes fully applied there for quite a while. And usually the car tends to understeer in this scenario and doesn't really respond. As soon as he's going out of the brake, all of a sudden the front grips up because it's allowed to. And I guess what his perception of the car here was in this corner, and when you see the difference that is being generated going into the corner, he's doing pretty much the same, braking arch and all that. It's just all moved forward, and overall he's braking a little more. So he's slowing the car down a lot more, and not just by error, but probably because he had the perception that the car is not capable of doing the corner as fast. Because I guess he felt it being a little too responsive, the rear getting loose or something. And what helps you there is understanding a bit more of how this car works. Usually in the Porsche, the issue that you're having is that the front end of the car, maybe we fly out of the car here for a second for that purpose, the front end of the car is usually the more capable one. And all the work that you do with the car is about keeping the rear in place and trying to get it rotated while not losing grip on the rear too much. And this makes the car really sensitive, and it's really responsive to what you do with the throttle pedal. As soon as you're off the throttle, the open differential, the shift and downforce balance to the front will cause the car to rotate a lot. And this, let's say, perceived as oversteer in a more general way. And then you say, okay, if I get oversteer, I might be going too fast. But in fact, it's not being too fast, but it's being the front being too powerful, so to say, having too much grip compared to the rear. And there are different ways to work around that. One way is certainly what he does, just reduce the speed a little more and go slower through the corner. And you can also see that he's very gentle on turn, and it takes him a long time to reach the maximum turning angle. Whereas if you look at my trace here, you can see I'm kind of balancing the car on the brake. It's so the rear is trying to step out, then I start to turn in, open the steering up a tiny bit again, turn in again. This is what's happening here in the trace. But then as soon as I'm out of the brake, you can see I'm going to rather a much higher turning angle right away in a really quick fashion. And what this is essentially is that I'm going slightly above the grip limit of the front tire and forcing a tiny amount of understeer in the car. This then is being helped a bit by going onto this curb. Usually if you go onto the curb, it starts rotating the car a bit more. And when you have that in the back of your mind, you can just remember that and say, okay, if I go onto this curb, I'll get more rotation than I was expecting going into the corner. So you could, for example, let's say you do 3 kilometers more, which you would think this is a bit too much for the corner. But if you think of the curb giving you additional rotation, you'd be like, okay, maybe these 2-3 kilometers can work. And then kind of balancing off this additional rotation the curb gives you is done by my slightly excessive turning angle here, right? And I'm not saying you should force understeer the car in a way that Alonso did in, I don't know, 2005 or so in the F1 car. But if you just look at the turning angle, well, he has these 50 degrees something turned here. I'll have somewhat like 80 degrees. So it's not like my arms are touching in the middle, right? So it's just a tiny bit more of what the slip of or let's say where the limit of the front tire is, just a tiny bit above that. And just forcing that understeer in the car makes it way less responsive, makes it way more predictable of where it's going to go, and should give you a way better feeling how to stabilize the rear in a different way, rather than just reducing the speed and playing a lot with the throttle to lock the rear differential to keep the car on its trajectory. Line-wise, I think he's fine here. He's making the compromise, bringing the car to the middle of the track, not going too wide, not staying too tight, to just get somewhat of an entry into the left-hander. But what he doesn't do is there's just more track on the left here. He said, even though he said he was trying to use that, but yeah, I guess it's more about how this part of the track becomes usable. Essentially, you can hook the inside tire just behind that curb there. It definitely does work, even though the Porsche is one of the cars that likes to bottom out with this setup. It wasn't a problem with the curb here, so it definitely works. And, well, kind of zooming back into the cockpit, and let's see how good I was. Not too good. Then same pattern into this left-hander. If we move forward into the chart here, this is the left-hander. You can see that my transition from the right corner to the left corner is done in a really quick fashion in the turning angle. So I'm just kind of forcing the car into a slight amount of understeer in the right, and then moving over to slight understeer going into the left, just to kind of work around the limitations of the rear and the heavy engine just always wanting to go straight and give you oversteer. And I'm kind of taking a tiny amount of capacity of the front axle while keeping the speed up to still tap into the downforce. And the second bit that you want to be focusing on going into the left-hander is that I'm working with the throttle pedal, and especially going out of the throttle pedal here is where everything is going to matter. Because if you just release the throttle completely, you'll have a weight shift in the car happening. Let's move out here once more for that reason. If you go out of throttle, the engine brake is going to kick in from there, and the weight in the car will travel forward a bit, so the car pitches forward just a tiny amount, gives you a little more downforce in the front, makes the rear a little lighter, loads up the fronts, unloads the rears. And just by going out of throttle in a more gentle fashion kind of delays this weight transfer, and also delays how quickly the front responds to the input here. Also noteworthy is only once I reach my maximum turning angle, I will go out of the throttle completely. And the reason for that is that I first do the weight transfer from side to side in the car before I shift it around from back to the front. You'll see that even better in the next corner if we roll forward. But the combination of things, just not unsettling the car as much with kind of delaying and reducing the amount of weight transfer happening, plus the higher turning angle tapping into a tiny amount of understeer, is going to make the car way more predictable for me, way more stable. And this way I can control this corner better, take a higher speed by exploiting more of the track. Coming then out of this corner, going, I think that's perfectly fine, the line choice, just not going too wide, kind of staying middle of the track to have enough time to bring it across to the left there. Perfectly fine. Now the upshift in the Porsche, going off throttle, turning in, and I guess we'll see some difference there as well if we look at the data. So moving forward here a bit more, we'll just reveal we're choosing the same point in time where we're going out of throttle, but then again there's a difference a bit in the applied turning angle. And again, I'm just coming across to my maximum turning angle a lot faster than he does. Eventually he's reaching the same level of turning, so he definitely does know where the front tire can be, how much he can ask of it, but he's kind of hesitating to go there because he's insecure of what the car is going to do. So while he's driving, he's probably just kind of evaluating, testing the car all the time while he's driving. Is this amount of grip that I have? Yes, I do. Okay, I can turn a bit more. Yes, the car responds. Can I do more? Can I do more? Can I do more? And he's testing all the time, whereas just, I don't know, somewhat just my experience, the amount of laps I did is, okay, this is what the car can do, so let's go there right away. And also the other important bit is the timing of going to the maximum turning angle. And it's pretty precise here. Maximum turning angle there, with going off throttle and bringing the weight forward, loading up the front tires, and allowing the car really to do this turn in. And then you can see mid corner. Okay, this is Ideally, we don't need that here, but you can see a tiny amount of throttle application mid-corner to just do that small correction of how fast the car is rotating or where it's positioned, or if I nailed the entry or not, if it's coming towards the inside a tiny bit too much. And I guess this was just probably was just scared of something, but this probably didn't do anything to the car too much. But just by going to this high turning angle right away, I get much more rotation done. And even though the speed in the corner is the same, being done with the rotation much earlier, I can apply the throttle in a way earlier fashion, way more aggressive fashion. And then where I will gain the time in the end is just that straight after Le Comp, essentially. So this is where it's going to matter a lot. And exiting the corner at 10, 11 kilometers more, coming onto the straight is going to cost him another 2/10. Then going forward to the long 180 degree, looking at the entry here, looking at the next braking point, the time difference is only a couple hundred. So again, not an area of focus for him, but let's take a look anyway. Just by the speed trace alone here, I can see that I'm going way deeper into the corner. In the middle of the corner, I'm going to be a lot slower than he is. But then on the exit, or let's say on the early exit especially, I gain a lot of time back. And then onto the straight, we're almost equal again. So there's a difference in approach. And if we roll it forward, and it's probably a bit much, let's do it this way. Braking point, I guess, is fine. But now he's braking again quite harshly here, while having quite a bit of turning angle applied. And you can see that I'm opening the brake much earlier to allow for more trail braking and allowing the front tires to really always grip up. And you see I also need to change the scale and the steering angle here now to really see the full motion that we're doing in this corner. But also, if we roll forward, you can see he's hooking the apex very early on in the corner. Now he's just staying there on the inside and tapping into the throttle every now and then to kind of position the car or make sure it's not going too far to the inside. So what we're seeing essentially is that he is driving this corner as a one apex corner, and we'll probably see this better if we look at it from above. Going to the middle of the corner here, this way. So it's a perfect 180 degrees corner, right? I mean, maybe it's 181 even. Anyway, so he's coming towards the inside here, and then he's staying inside to the end of the corner, and only then he's accelerating. What I'm doing differently then is I'm coming towards, and I'm just braking to the inside here, overshooting that a bit, so I'm still carrying a little more speed up until here, running a bit wide, deeper into the corner, and then kind of having my outside slowest point somewhere here or so, and then I'm starting to accelerate back out of the corner here with placing a second apex later in the corner, which just means I'm putting somewhat of a V into this corner, a V shape, right? I mean, it's not going to be as pronounced as that, but that's what you call it, right? You're painting a V into that corner, you're Ving that corner. And this seems to me just a better approach. So in this phase here in the corner, I'll be faster. And here at a short amount of time, I'll be slower, but then I'll be faster here again, where I gain the time. So that's just a different approach there of braking a tiny bit later, keeping the speed alive a tiny bit longer, but making a sacrifice middle of the corner where I'm becoming slower. Also, if you're going slower, you make a lot of rotation in a short amount of time, and then you get the car straightened to put the power down and carry more speed onto this short straight, where it will also matter just as much. Coming forward then, this one is a really tricky corner because there's so many things to look out for. Just coming over to the right, you have to focus somewhere here on that curb. How much can you actually go to the right, and when do you actually have to brake, because there aren't many reference points. And then you're getting the weight transfer into this left corner. It definitely is a tricky one. So if we roll it forward, doesn't look too bad. The line seems alright, but if we look at the data for this one, there's a massive speed difference between us, which is almost 20 kilometers an hour. And it's not so much the line choice, but I think he's just making his life harder here from applying so much braking. And very likely this harsh braking here going up to 100% and really slowing down the car a lot will lead to several things. First thing will be, if you apply 100% braking, the car is very unlikely to have resources left to do turning. So he's kind of forcing the car into an initial understeer in this corner, so it doesn't want to turn in. So for him, it feels like he's going too fast, so he's braking even more and making the problem worse. And on the other hand is, by doing that much braking, you're pitching the car forward a lot, and then you're getting the same problem really as let's do this once more. Here's the 100% braking, and now he's doing several things at the same time. He's trying to turn in, he's trying to slow the car down a lot, and the only reaction the car has left really is either the rear steps out because of the sudden weight transfer, the shift in downforce balance, because the front is being pushed into the ground, generates a lot of grip, and the rear becomes light and kind of wants to get loose. Plus, the applied turning angle is just too much for the car to cope with right now. So how you can also do this corner is brake a lot less, and you can see I'm kind of starting to turn to the left here, straightening the car up, and as I hit the brake, I have to open the steering almost completely to control for the rear getting loose. So I'm just opening up, balancing the car out, and once I come out of the brake, I can really start turning in here. Another small tap here on the throttle to prevent the car from over-rotating, which is really just a Porsche thing to do, and on all other cars that would be dirty technique, essentially. And would just tell you did something wrong on the entry, but just the Porsche in this game requires you to do so many corrections because of the amount of grip the front always has, and you really have to work around that. However, this allows me to not unsettle the car as much, kind of work around the shift and balance, also not forcing the understeer into the car as much as he's doing here while applying a turning angle. And then by the time I turn in, I really go out of the brake again. The front comes up again, the rear squats down a tiny bit again, and I have a way more neutral aerodynamic balance of the car again, which gives me way more confidence going into this corner. And it's just a tiny amount of this pattern still visible that I turn in a little harsher, but it's not as pronounced here as in the other corners before. And then you can see the difference really is only the amount of speed I carry through the corner, but because he's going slower, he can put up the power down earlier, and he's catching up with the speed difference that we had. And onto this straight, we're perfectly equal again. So he's really just losing going into this corner, but it's immediately worth 2.5 tenths or something, just by essentially braking way too hard, unsettling the car. And if you be a little easier there and let the car work a bit more, going back to the neutral aerodynamic balance, it will work a lot better. And also the same is pretty much true here for Pujon coming up next. Let's go there. He's using all the track on the right, coming from the curb, flicking the car to the inside. But what he's doing now is, again, if you just look at the brake trace down there, becoming really pronounced. And already applying the turning angle, initially he gets understeer, so he feels like the car doesn't want to turn in yet. And as soon as he's going out of the brake, the car will have a lot of capacity of turning in, and now he just has to wait with a very low turning angle and essentially drive below the limit of the car, because else he'd be going towards the inside grass or so. You'll also see him being on throttle a lot earlier than I am because he reduces speed so much. But it's really just the same idea here that is happening, that with his high and huge and heavy amount of braking, he's unsettling the car first by understeering a bit, and the other bit would be he's changing the downforce balance so much that it becomes kind of unstable on the rear, and the turn-in is really a difficult thing to do. The other bit really is that he does a lot of, let's say, turn-in on the braking, and you can also see I'm braking a lot earlier. But then as I approach the corner, I'm going out of the brake completely, and once I really start turning in is very late here. And there's even, again, on what would be considered on other cars quite dirty is kind of allowed on the Porsche. Ideally, you work around that and kind of get into the corner without the throttle application to stabilize the car. But sometimes you just need it to correct for this oversteer, kind of lock the rear tires together, close the differential to get some more understeer in the car. But what he's doing is coming from this curb in a very just forcing the car into there so much, and what I'm doing is braking a little late, little earlier, reduce some speed, but then go out of the brake, get the car back to its more neutral aerodynamic balance, and then I can again carry way more speed through the corner, just kind of waiting and kind of controlling for excessive turning by tapping the throttle here a bit, or kind of balancing the car in the steering. But the important bit really is to be off the brakes in the Porsche to reduce the pitch in the car. That's the most important thing you have to keep in mind, and this should make you able, even though I'm losing some on entry here, right? But I gained so much out of this corner that in the end, from this section, from 8.7 tenths down onto the straight, we're looking at another 2.5 tenths loss for him, just because he couldn't carry that speed through the corner, because he was changing the aero balance going into this corner, and then he worked around that by braking a lot harder, reducing the speed a lot more to get the car stabilized again. But the same can be achieved by simply being off the brake pedal to have a more neutral car going into the corner, and then really tap into the downforce available at this higher speed that I'm carrying. Coming towards the S's here, I guess on entry into this right-hander, you see a similar pattern again. Just harsh amount of braking, where he's going to rather unsettle the car a bit here, and has the turning angle applied quite a bit. 100% braking, the car has a tendency to understeer. And at the same, let's say at the same turning angle, you will see me always opening up something on the brake already to allow the car really to grip up with the front and start rotating. Next difference we'll see here in the gears, he's going down to second, creating more engine braking, tapping more into an open differential, creating a lot of rotation potential in the car. Also a difference here in the amount of turning angle. I'm just doing the same again as I did in Les Combes, just turning a tiny bit above of what the front axle can actually do, creating a tiny amount of understeer in the car just to have it kind of settle the rear and have a more predictable car throughout this corner. And this allows me in the end to just carry more speed through this right-hander here. And we're talking 10, 11 kilometers, right? But I'm still ending up at the same point at the exit of the corner. And this is really done by kind of really just timing the braking input with the amount of turning input. And now during the braking phase, the car pitching forward again, being really unstable with the rear becoming light. And then really, as soon as I go out of the brake, this only becomes the time where I really start to turn in, because now the aero balance is more stable again. And then I really just try to let the car coast through this corner and let the car work the excess speed off on its own. And then at the end of the corner, we have exiting the corner at the same speed again, picking the throttle up in a similar fashion. But you can see here that because he reduced the speed so much, he needs to tap into the throttle to keep the car away from the inside curb there. So now he's going out of the brake, the car grips up, he increased the turning angle, but now the car is so slow that there's so much more grip potential, and he could drive a way tighter arch through the corner as he's doing right now. So he has to pick up the throttle to keep the car on a wider line away from the inside curb, and kind of artificially take potential out of the car for cornering. And then here on the exit, he's doing definitely the right approach with, again, kind of staying middle of the road to give away something on the exit here out of the right-hander, but having somewhat of a better turn in position for the left-hander. And I think here he's doing it kind of all right. But again, you can also see he's quite hesitant on the turning angle. So if we go here to the left hand, you can see my transition from the right corner to the left corner is just way more pronounced, way harsher, way quicker, and also more timed with how I go out of throttle. And I really go only out of throttle once I almost reach my highest turning angle, so the car is already in kind of a state of understeering. And then if I go out of throttle, the additional weight shift to the front is not going to be that much of an issue to the car, and it's easier to handle. Tapping into this 1% of understeer, you can see through the corner I'm just carrying, even though doing the same line, 3, 4, up to 5 kilometers more. And this is then where I gain a little more time even, but on the exit, we're just way more equal again. So on the straight, he's fine. It's just in the corners finding the way to exploit this pretty special car in the game a bit more by doing something different in the inputs that you're doing. 2 more tricky corners to come, so let's go for the braking zone of this right-hander here. And as I said, he's making perfectly right approach of putting the later apex here, and then putting the power down completely, using every track you can get on the exit as much as the game really allows you to do. So if we look at this one, is there any time loss? Yeah, there is. So from 1.3 seconds down somewhat at the exit, 1.4, 1.5 seconds almost. And then on the straight, there's some more loss. But let's look at this corner for now. And I guess you could say that this braking arch looks really similar. And I guess his only problem here was the line was all right, the braking arch looks to be all right, the trail braking very similar indeed. But once I go out of the brake, just my kind of forcing more out of the car in terms of turning just allows me to force this tiny amount of understeer in the car, just as in all the other corners, stabilize the rear, and this just allows me again to carry more speed through the corner here, 3, 4, 5 kilometers that he's never going to back coming onto the straight. No difference in gearing there. It's really only the amount of turning and the suddenness that I go into this turning angle and have the confidence of staying there, stabilizing the rear, instead of just testing around of how much the car can do what he's doing here with this ever increasing turning angle till very late in the corner. Throttle application then perfectly fine. But on the exit here, it's 6.5 kilometers that he's trailing. And since from here everything is flat out or almost flat out, it's just something he's never going to get back pretty much until the breaking point of the chicane. Small lift for both of us in this fast right-hander. Definitely doing the right thing here. Usually you want to have a more harsher turn in heel, and you'll see me doing this as well, right? My turning angle increases quite a bit quicker than his does, forcing the car into there a little more, tapping more into the potential of the front, but still I needed that lift here. Probably just because I didn't nail it. Your target is always to stay flat out in this corner, and either that can work by just having kind of a sudden increase in turning angle, still being on the artificial turf there, whatever it is. The car won't respond there too much because it's quite slippery. Then it's still slippery on the curb, but it responds a little more. And once you come onto the tarmac with your outside loaded tire, the car will suddenly really turn in, and the rear usually isn't able to follow that immediately, so you get quite a nice rotation coming into this corner. And sometimes that still isn't enough, and then you can kind of go onto this inside curb a little, which gives you a tiny bit more of extra rotation through this corner if you exploit it the right way, and then you can stay flat out here usually, coming onto the straight. And then from here everything really is straightforward, using all the track available here on the right side. Pretty much the track limit is the white line. You can see he's there seems to be even a bit more allowed by the game. So really use everything you can get to keep the speed alive through the left-hander. It's probably flat out from both lines, but if you take that wider arch, you're gonna just maintain 1 or 2 extra kilometers going through there. And this, I guess, is also why you can see here that exit of this corner 1.47 seconds down at the next braking point, just another tenth lost because he never really was able to catch up to the speed that I was carrying here at the exit. Out of, I don't actually know the name of that corner, Stavlo or something. Then different approach for the chicane there. Let's look at that to round up this video. Perfectly fine here. And now he's taking this wide swing through the kink here, and I'm definitely staying tight there. And while he's aiming to brake in a perfectly straight line, you would see me, let's zoom out a bit, you'd see me kind of do sort of a diagonal line towards the outside here. It's not really pronounced, but I'm always just aiming on taking the shorter line here, which probably gives me a few thousandths. And then braking at the same point here probably than he does. Just doing the diagonal line has a couple more centimeters, maybe 20, 30. It's not going to be that much of more braking distance. But the more important bit is, and I learned that from a GT3 driver when we had a coaching session, is I was coaching him, but he was teaching me as well in a way. We'll go into that detail in a second. That at this point in time, I'm still traveling towards the outside curb, and you can see this in. I would have to make it more pronounced here, but let's look at the numbers here. So I'm still turning to the right. Where's the turning angle? The difference I was trying to point out is not that visible, sadly. However, you will see that while he's still kind of turning to the left here, being indicated by the positive value of the steering, I'm already turning to the right there. And so my turning essentially starts somewhere here where I'm lifting off the brake a little bit, where I start the trail braking phase, which is a lot longer than his is, right? His is only here to here, almost only a second and a half or so. And for me, the trail braking phase is easily 3 seconds or 2.5, something like that. And what I'm doing here is I'm already, by still turning, but already turning to the right and coming in this diagonal line towards the outside here, I have already loaded up the outside front tire, and I have already built the grip there. And then when I'm going out of the brake, I'll have less surprise in the front axle because it already has built the grip and it's not going to show as much of a sudden reaction. And what the GT3 driver was calling it is priming the car and kind of setting it up for the corner and having all of the load built already around the corners of the car. And the other bit really important here is that you do exploit this inside curb, and let me fly there for a second. So there's some elevation going on the track going uphill. And if you go really close here, you can see, like here, you almost jump over a small crest coming over this curb, and you need to make use of that driving around there. Let me roll it forward just a tiny bit more to keep the car there, right there. You definitely have to go over this curb. And what happens is, since the track is going uphill here on the inside with the curb a lot, this front inside tire, by having to go uphill, will be slowed down. And then this all of a sudden becomes the center point of rotation of the whole car, and everything of the car, all 3 other tires, will start rotating around this front inside tire. So you can essentially go over this curb a tiny bit too fast, because it feels like we're going to understeer and run wide a bit, but then taking the small elevation, and just by that slowing the inside side of the car down, will help you rotate the car a little more than you were expecting to be available to you. And then you can kind of exploit this, just how the track works, how the surface of the track is built, just exploit this section of the track and then stay a little more inside than you were expecting or planning to have. And then it's really important to, not run as wide here, to still get somewhat of an entry to this left-hander, which he's just, it was probably just a mistake on that lap. And you'll see this in the data that he's really losing a lot on the exit here. And in total, while he's overshooting the right-hander a lot and gaining some time there until the middle of the corner, from 1.61 seconds to the line, it's going to 1.7. He's certainly losing some more time into the next lap already, just because there's a lot of time lost on the exit there, right? And also, he can't make use of a weight transfer middle of these 2 corners, because he's essentially still too fast for the left-hander. And you can see me go into the throttle middle of these 2 corners and then going back out of the throttle, even a very tiny brake tab happening there to bring the weight onto the front tires, just let them grip up something additionally, get rotation through this corner. And then, on the exit, a lot more speed carried onto the straight, initially being 14, 15 kilometers. And then on the line, still kind of 3-4 kilometers that I'd be carrying into the next lap. I'd call this the end of the video. Make sure, if you need more of this, consider joining the channel, because there are, 10, 20, 15 videos already of other tracks and car combinations online. I think this is really useful. Give it a go. See you next time. Bye.